Hello, welcome to this video, CMI Assignment 502 and part 3, where I'll be talking through assessment criteria 1.3. So still part of task 1, where we need to write a report entitled Approaches to Developing, Managing and Leading Teams. Assessment criteria 1.3 is to analyze strategies for managing team leaders. Slightly different focus with this one. So what do we mean, first of all, by analyze? So we need to break the subjects down into separate parts and examine each part in detail. So I would say for this one, it's about looking at two different strategies and examining each strategy in detail. Identify the main issues and show how the main ideas are related in practice and why they are important. Reference to current research or theory may support the analysis. So we need to talk about two different strategies for managing team leaders, and then why ultimately does this matter? Why are we using these approaches, or why might we use these approaches? Part of it as well, close to evaluate, but sort of still also a useful thing to do where it says analyze, is to look at some strengths and weaknesses to the approaches as well. So that might be over delivering a little bit, but I think it does help to evidence that we're hitting this assessment criteria if we look at perhaps a few strengths and weaknesses to these two different strategies as well. So I will walk through a couple of examples. So just to position this a little bit then, when we're talking about team leaders, why might that be different? So essentially here, when we're talking about leading leaders, so these are people who have a management or leadership role in the organization. So with that, they're likely to be experienced and competent performers with their own management responsibility. So they will have people reporting into them. So they're going to be frontline leaders with a certain amount of management responsibility, which we will then need to be aware of in our own approach and style and how we engage with these team leaders. So how does this make them different to leading frontline colleagues? I think what I would say is that even more so, we need to take care not to micromanage, overly direct, or disempower these experienced, competent performers. So I think that trust is really important when it comes to effectively managing team leaders, and it may well be that we need to show trust. What we need to do in order to support that, we need to analyze two different strategies, look at the approach in some detail, and consider the pros and cons of each approach for effectively managing a team leader. I've got two examples which will hopefully bring this to life and maybe give you something to think about. So first of all, strategy one is coaching them. So using a coaching style of leadership when we engage with team leaders. So John Whitmore, who's really good on this, he has a chapter in his book called Manager as Coach. And he says that, here, this is the art of facilitating the performance, learning and development of another. So we are facilitating the decision, the thinking, the solutions that the team leader comes up with. We're not telling them what to do, because again, they've already got experience and capability and competence. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be in a team leader role. I know that's a little bit of an assumption, but let's just work with that for the moment. It's not about telling them what to do. That shouldn't be necessary. It could be about coaching or facilitating them in their decision making, how they work. So really, the coaching style of leadership is leaning more on questions and giving support over giving direction and telling. It might be so just to break this down and analyze it in a little bit more depth, it could be that we draw on models such as GROW to facilitate conversations, plans, and solutions. So GROW there, what's the goal that you're trying to work towards? Reality, where are you now? The O is options, what are the possible courses of action? And then the W, the way forward or the will do, what are you actually going to do? What are your first steps? So using these sorts of frameworks to facilitate conversations can lead to clear objectives and plans that the person that we're coaching owns. So we're not telling them what to do, we're facilitating the conversation. You can use models like GROW in team environments as well as one-to-one. So quite a versatile tool, that really, provided people are clear on what they need to achieve and how to get there. So the pros of a coaching leadership style is it is very empowering. It develops trust. I think it also, one thing that's not there, but I think it's worth mentioning, is that it does help grow capability for the future. Ultimately, it's about getting other people doing the thinking for themselves rather than relying on you. So it's quite good from a succession planning point of view, because if you then get promoted or you move on to other things, it means that everything can continue without you. So it's about kind of building for the future. Cons, it can be slower. So it takes more time than giving simple direction. It depends on the team leader having the ability to develop their solutions as well to some extent. Although, this can be very much a dialogue and a discussion. It's not to say that you wouldn't make recommendations or suggestions if it was helpful. But I guess it's just that our start point might be that we need to, if you like, coach or facilitate the best thinking of the team leader first. And then if they want some advice or guidance, then by all means we can give that. But I guess the start point is that we coach them. Whereas if you've got someone who's perhaps a bit less experienced, who might be more of a frontline colleague who's new to the role, your start point might be to give them a bit of direction or give them a steer. So we're sort of flipping it around here, really. Second strategy, 360 feedback. Yeah, so this is a controversial one. I don't know what you think about this, if you've ever been through it. Some people really like it, some people really don't. So here, our team leader will seek feedback from peers, people who report into them, and their managers. So we might actually be feeding into this as a line manager as well. So it's where the individual gets feedback from different perspectives and at different levels of the organization. Sometimes actually you get feedback from people who are outside of the organization, key clients or suppliers or whatever. So that's quite interesting as well. So it's really about giving the person really comprehensive feedback from different perspectives. This allows for a rounded view covering different perspectives rather than just one. It provides the team leader with a range of viewpoints on how they're leading. As a pro, when it's positioned and done well, so when it's carefully positioned and contracted and we're quite clear on what we're asking for, it can really help enhance the self-awareness and understanding of that team leader about their management style, what's working, what changes they might need to make, how they're coming across to different people in the business. So when it's positioned carefully, it's fantastic. When it's not positioned carefully, it can become confused with performance management, can harm trust and motivation. So actually, when it starts to, where I've seen this go wrong is when it was positioned as a development opportunity, but then if the critical stuff that came back then was used in performance management for the individual by the organization, that was pretty horrendous, really. And it just kind of totally lost faith in things like, in the whole process. So it's not, if it's positioned well, it should be about development rather than judgment. And if we're doing 360 feedback to then feed into things like performance management or appraisal or that sort of thing, then it becomes a bit of a mess, really. So it's better, I think, to keep it as a development thing to raise self-awareness rather than the performance management thing to make judgments about someone and their progression and that sort of thing. That's just what I think. I've seen it used in my past life. It was called Slater Mate. So we really want to avoid that, really, because I think that misses what can be a fantastic opportunity, but it just needs to be carefully handled. So over to you, really. Two approaches to managing team leaders. I've given two examples. You don't have to use those. You could use anything that you've used or observed or been part of. Give a description, but remember to analyze it as well. And I think that, so just breaking it down, looking at why it's important and any pros and cons would be great. Present some judgments, draw a conclusion as to the value of the approach. So what do you think? Does it add value? Would you use it? What would your stipulations be? So again, like 360 feedback there works really well, but it just needs to be really carefully positioned. What do you think about your approaches? There we go. And that is another assessment criteria complete, ticked off the list. Look out for my next video where I'll be talking about 1.4.